with the principle of creation. We begin from those fundamental questions about human life and the universe. Throughout history, people have anguished over these fundamental questions. This is because no one has fully understood the root principle, the blueprint by which humanity and the universe were originally created. To approach this topic properly, it is not enough for us to simply examine the resultant reality, the world that we can measure externally. The proper way to address this, the fundamental question, is that of the causal reality. Problems concerning human life and the universe cannot be solved without first understanding the nature of God. So section 1 is the dual characteristics of God and the created universe. To begin with, we have to ask, how can we know the divine nature of the invisible God? As you know, there are some who deny God's existence based on the fact that we can't see him, can't touch him, can't encounter him physically, and can't measure. But this in itself is not legitimate, because there are many things in our life that we cannot see, and yet we understand their existence because we see their result. Gravity, for example. We can't see gravity working, but we know what happens as a result. And so by observing the effect, we understand the cause and understand the law of gravity. Similarly, my mind. Now, you can't see my mind, but I hope you'll give me the benefit of the doubt that I have one, because I'm expressing my thoughts, feelings, passion, ideas in the way that it's coming out of my physical body. So again, you see the effect and you understand the invisible cause. So it's not legitimate to deny God's existence simply because we can't measure, see, touch, or experience with our physical senses. In fact, by definition, if we're seeking to understand the first cause of the created world, the world that exists in time and space, then would that cause the world that's defined by time and space, would that cause be within time or be the origin of time itself? Would that cause be within space, or would space be within God? Therefore, I think you know the answer. Therefore, we say that God is infinite, not finite, beyond space. It doesn't simply mean that God is everywhere. It actually means that God is not defined by a specific location within the limited realm of space. And we say God is eternal. That doesn't just mean that God is always here for all time, but beyond time, without being defined by a beginning point and an end point within the limited realm of time, which is a facet of the visible world. So how can we then know the divine nature of the invisible God? Well, one way to fathom God's deity is by observing the universe that he created. Just as we come to know the character of an artist through his works, let's look more closely. So we can understand the nature of God by observing the diverse things of the creation. For example, in the plays of Shakespeare, we find a diversity of topics, but common themes that run throughout these plays. The struggle between men and women, the battle between good and evil, the imagery of light versus dark. Now, these themes are consistently running through all of the plays and tell us something about the nature of the author. And if we find recurrent themes that are expressed in every single form of life, from simple to complex, will it not tell us something about the author of life? Likewise, look at the paintings by Van Gogh. You look at 10 paintings, you could recognize the characteristic style of the artist, even though the subject matter is different, because the style reflects the artist's passion, emotion, and inner nature. So just as we can understand Van Gogh by his paintings, or Shakespeare by his writings, we can understand something about the creator, the cause, by looking at the world he created, the visible effect. Therefore, St. Paul wrote in Romans 1:20, ever since the creation of the world, his invisible nature, namely his eternal power, his deity, his godlike nature, has been clearly perceived in the things that have been made. So let's look first then at the common elements in the natural world. We'll begin by pointing out these elements that are found universally in all things. Every entity, first of all, possesses the dual characteristics of yang and yin, or as we would say in the West, positivity and negativity. More fundamentally, however, every entity also possesses another set of dual characteristics, that of outer form and inner quality. Now, the visible outer form resembles the invisible inner quality. The inner quality is called internal nature, while the shape or structure is called our external form. Now, when we say that the inner and outer aspect is more fundamental, let's look at human beings. Before you are a man or a woman, you are more fundamentally human. And our human personality differentiates us from animals, plants, or any other living thing. Human personality arises from the inner nature, our thoughts, feelings, character, conscience, and how we express that in our visible form. So masculinity and femininity are attributes or expressions of human personality. And of course, every man, every woman has elements of both. A man is not all masculine, a woman is not all feminine. These are two essences that are harmonized within each. For this reason, we can tell a lot about a person by reading their face or their body language and how they sit or express themselves, or even being able to evaluate things in their hand or the lumps on their head or how their body expresses itself, because the body expresses the inner nature of the mind. So the internal nature and external form together constitute dual characteristics. Now let's look at every form of life in the universe in general. Let's look more closely at this. When we go to the most simple forms of life, particles, here on your left. Particles exist as either positive, negative, or neutral because they have both elements within them. They make an electronic magnetic relationship to form the basis of atoms. Atoms then form an electrochemical relationship by sharing an electron with another atom to form the basis of molecules. Molecules form electrochemical relationships to form the basis of matter. Matter arises, and we see in the plant kingdom the dual characteristics of stamen and pistil, or sporophyte, gametophyte. Coming up to animal life, we find that all animals express masculinity, male and female. Even animals that reproduce asexually have both aspects within one body. Even cells, which reproduce by splitting, dividing through mitosis. That process is initiated by the give and take relationship of positive and negative elements within the nucleus. And then we come, of course, to human beings who have masculine and feminine as the foundation of our existence and reproduction and life. So we can see in every form of life, from simple to complex, this expression of the dual characteristics of masculinity and femininity, or positivity and negativity. Two equally valuable, yet complementary aspects that allow for the existence and life of each being. Now, when we consider, again, from the other set of dual characteristics, character and form, when we look at energy in its most fundamental level, Einstein, in his theory of relativity, showed us that energy cannot be created or destroyed. It has always been here, but it can change its state, and energy is the basis of matter. However, energy doesn't act at random, out of chaos, but the development of life is the process of energy becoming more ordered, more directed, more organized and developed. So energy seems to act according to a lawful and principled nature. There's some inherent directive aspect that governs how life develops in the universe. When we look at matter, which is composed of energy, once again, we see in the laws of chemistry and physics that each of the elements in the periodic table acts and reacts according to its unique nature. Now, when we see these atoms and molecules come together and forming higher forms of life, such as plants, plants act also according to a lawful directive element within them. For example, the roots will always grow toward the water. The leaves will always follow the sun. Yet we can't cut open a plant, pull out the law, and now the plant is going to be unclear and undirected. The plant's mind, or its lawful nature, is inherent within the nature of the plant. Likewise, animals. Let's consider closely. Likewise, animals are governed by their animal mind, which is primarily based upon instinct. And human beings have all of these elements. Human beings have all of these elements, and yet we also have a deeper aspect of our mind. We have self-awareness. We have a moral capacity to evaluate good and evil. We recognize the moral law and are conscious of our relationship with the larger universe. Our conscience is the basis of the human mind. So once again, from simple to complex, we see that there is a consistent pattern that every single entity exists with these two sets of dual characteristics. Now let's consider the relationship between God's internal nature and external form and God's original masculinity and femininity. God's original internal nature and original external form each contain the expressions or attributes of original masculinity and original femininity. Similarly, when we look at human beings, we could understand that within our mind there are masculine and feminine natures, such as initiating and dominating and guiding versus nurturing and listening and reflecting, etc. Also, in our physical selves, there are masculine and feminine attributes. Within God, therefore, original yang and original yin, original masculinity and femininity are attributes of his original nature and his original external form. Now, within the first cause, God's original internal nature must contain the essences of all the law, principle, plant, inner natures of everything in the universe. And God's original external form must contain the essence of all the matter in the universe, which is itself energy. Likewise, within the Creator, there must be the essence of all the masculine natures in the universe, as well as all the feminine natures in the universe. Now, the masculinity and femininity within the Creator is not some strange or foreign concept, but actually, in the Bible, in Genesis 1:27, it is stated clearly, God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female. He created them. So, man is not just males, but man is male and female in the image of God. Well, let's stay here. So, to summarize, we can say that God is the subject and the harmonious union of these natures of inner and outer, inner nature and external form. Likewise, God is the harmonious union of masculinity and femininity, which are manifestations or attributes of the qualities of his character and form, respectively. Now, God stands as the subject partner toward the universe, having the qualities of internal nature and masculinity or subjectivity in relationship with the universe, which responds to God and has the more external aspect or is feminine in response to God. This is the only reason we can justify calling God He or calling God our Father. Because while containing both masculine and feminine natures, the position that God takes is the initiating, subject, and internal position, or the masculine position in relationship to the universe. Now, the relationship between God and the universe can be summarized, therefore, thusly. God is the invisible subject partner, and the universe as a whole is an object to God, an object partner. According to the principle of creation, God's dual characteristics manifest themselves in the universe either symbolically or in image as individual embodiments of truth, which constitute the universe. In other words, God expresses himself in his image and likeness, human beings, or symbolically in the rest of the natural world. Let me explain. Every existing being is created reflecting the nature of God with character and form manifested masculine and feminine. These two sets of dual characteristics. This is universal, all forms of life. It's for that reason that when we want to understand our own structure and function in biology class, we will cut open a frog or some other animal to analyze the systems that are more simple versions of what has developed into us, because life develops according to this consistent principle. Now, when we say human beings are in image and the rest of the natural world are symbolic in nature, please consider this. When a hyena laughs, he hasn't just heard a joke. You've heard of a laughing hyena, but he's not laughing at something that's funny, nor does he understand something being funny, or more specific, but only symbolizes that element that we can relate to. Another good example would be if you would see a graceful swan gliding through the water, extending its neck like a ballet dancer, next to an ugly duckling, wah, 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 going back and forth. Now, externally, one looks graceful and with repose and calm and beauty, while the other has a different external expression. But in fact, inside them, they are governed by the same instinctive desire 24 hours a day to find food. The swan is not actually being graceful, thinking gracefully, etc., but symbolizes that fact. In another sense, when we look at the winter sky, in winter when the trees are barren, when the sky has become gray, when the cold winds blow, there's a feeling of desolation and loneliness and reflection and depth that's evoked within ourselves as human beings. But the trees aren't lonely. The sky isn't sad. The natural world is only symbolically reflecting these qualities. But you and I as human beings, we feel them. We understand them. We can connect to them. That's why our relationship with the divine nature of our Creator is one where we can pray. We can reflect on these things. We can respond and relate to the nature of God. Let's say one final word about God's nature. What can we say about his inner nature? Well, the Bible tells us that God is a righteous God, a loving God, a long-suffering God, a patient God, etc., etc. But by looking at the textbook of the universe, we can also understand the nature of the Creator by the world that he has made. What is it that allowed chaos to become cosmos? The foundation for this cosmos is that everything has order. There's order. Why is there order? Because everything follows law. And behind these laws are purpose, value, and productivity. So there's principle behind these laws. Order, law, and principle is the foundation for the cosmos. As life arises, we see higher qualities of beauty, truth, and goodness. When we come to the animal world, we see love. But not just the instinctual love that we find in animals. When we come to the human form of life, we find the spiritual capacity to be bonded even after our loved ones have long passed away. The spiritual capacity of heart and love. And when we consider the laws of the universe, they aren't voted on periodically. They are eternal, unchanging, and absolute. Likewise, the true definition of beauty, truth, or goodness is that which is eternally true and universally true. And also the love we seek has the quality of being lasting and eternal. So when we look at the universe, we can recognize the expression of the nature of its Creator, a God of order, law, and principle, beauty, truth, and goodness, love and heart, and a God who is eternal, unchanging, unique, and absolute. Now, let's consider Section 2, universal prime energy, give and take action, and the 4-position foundation. More about the structure, the laws, and the functionality of the universe. First, universal prime energy. God, the creator of all things, is the absolute reality, not just a God that we evoke whenever we try to explain a mystery, but the essence of life, at the heart of the way life operates and its character and nature. God is eternal, self-existent, and as we've discussed, transcendent of time and space. Now, therefore, the energy for God's existence, the fundamental energy of God's own being, must be absolute, eternal, and self-existent. Because the first cause exists with dual characteristics, that's the foundation, through give and take, for God's own power and existence. But not only is this energy the foundation for God's existence, it is the origin of all energies and forces that allow created beings to exist. We call this fundamental energy universal prime energy. Prime because it's the initial, original force, and universal because it's the energy that allows all beings to be sustained. Now let's consider how this fundamental force relates to the relationality of all things in creation, the principle of give and take action. Through the agency of universal prime energy, the subject and object elements of every entity which come out of God, express God, form a common base and enter into interaction. This interaction in turn generates the forces that every entity needs to exist, to reproduce, and to act. For example, proton and electron. Proton and electron establish a give and take relationship through electromagnetic chemical connection and form the foundation for a greater whole, an atom. Similarly, a man and woman enter into a love relationship and bear a child and form a family. Or, in everyday life, John Lennon and Paul McCartney came together, brainstormed, inspired each other, and wrote wonderful music. This is how life moves. All of the forces for existence, multiplication, and action are generated by the give and take action between subject and object. So universal prime energy facilitates a common base that allows interaction that create the forces for every entity to exist. This interaction, generating these forces through this process, we call give and take action. The fact is that nothing in the universe lives by itself or for itself. When we look in the natural world, we see that every system seeks balance. The balance between the predators in a particular environment and the prey. They will always seek a balance. The balance between high pressure and low pressure in a weather system. Or the fact that plants provide oxygen for animals. Animals return carbon dioxide for plants. Plants become food for animals, and the animals, when they die, fertilize the soil and produce new growing plants. We can find throughout the creation this ecological balance, each ecosystem seeking that through harmonious relationships. Now look at the human body. Within our body, the same thing is true. Our fundamental vital systems operate through give and take relationship. For example, we inhale and we exhale. In addition, we assimilate food, and that food goes to every cell in our body, while the waste that comes back is then dissimilated. Assimilation and dissimilation. Our circulatory system, the arteries carry the oxygen and food to every cell and bring back the waste and gas. Now, every system operates this way. Our muscles, we have a voluntary and an involuntary system, and our muscles work in pairs. One contracts while the other relaxes to accomplish most of our actions. Similarly, our nervous system, we have a sympathetic and a parasympathetic nervous system. Look at our face. We have two eyes rather than one, so that these two comparison points give us depth perception, because two different points are comparing in the brain constantly. That allows us to kick a soccer ball, or to step up on the curb when we're walking, to balance and harmonize, to dance, to move in a coordinated way. And our brain is making thousands of calculations constantly through reciprocal give and take relationships. We have two ears rather than one, so that we can tell not only the distance of a sound, but its direction, as the brain immediately compares how the two different eardrums receive the decibels. And there are example after example after example in the human body. But let's look at human society, and we can again see the principle of give and take action, that nothing lives by itself. What is a good society? It's where relationships are harmonious and healthy. Husband and wife, parent and child, brother and sister, friend and friend, teacher and student, government or leadership and people, employer, employee, etc. A harmonious society is one where there's good reciprocal relationships that begin with giving. It's not take and give or take and take, but give and take. And this principle is also enshrined in the scriptures. The Bible says that wherever two or more are gathered in his name, he will be in their midst. And Jesus said, ask, and it will be given. Knock, and the door will be opened. Seek, and you will find. Likewise, Jesus said, by the judgment you pronounce, you'll be judged. And the measure you give is the measure you will receive. Next, let's consider the principle of origin, division, union, action, and the process by which all beings come into existence. The process in which out of God, the origin, two entities are separately manifested and reunited into oneness by making a common base, having give and take action, and bringing about a new being is called origin, division, union, action. And it's the process by which all beings come into existence. Let's consider then the next step. As a result of origin, division, union, action, four positions are formed. God, the origin, the divided subject and object partners that express his dual characteristics, and the result of their relationship, a union. These four positions then constitute the foundation for the fulfillment of that being's existence. Now, any one of these four positions may assume the position of the subject partner and engage the other three as its object partners, forming a communion of three object partners. For example, God, of course, loves, cares for, and invests in each of the other three. And yet God will also respond to the needs, desires, or situations of each of the other three. Likewise, a man may feel responsible to lead and protect and take responsibility for his family. But a mature man, a mature person, knows how to, recognizes that every relationship, every couple is unique. And a mature man knows how to listen to his wife when necessary, how to allow her to lead in the areas where she is strong. And every relationship is a dynamic one and involves not only husband and wife, but can be sometimes mother and son, or father and daughter, or brother and sister, etc. And finally, a child, of course, is an object toward its father, mother, and ultimately the Creator. But also, when that child is in need or has a desire or expresses itself, parents will respond, as will God through them. So here we see these purposes of three objects for each of these beings. So let me summarize. When each of the four then acts as the subject partner and enters into give and take with the other three revolving around it, they fulfill the three object's purpose. When the origin, therefore, and the subject and object partner projected and their union fulfill these three object purposes, a foundation of four positions is established: God, subject, object, and union. This foundation of four positions is what every form of life in the universe strives to achieve and is defined by. So the foundation, the four-position foundation, is first of all the root of the principle of three stages. Because this comes about through origin, division, and union, we will see that there are three stages in the development of life, which we'll talk about later. And the number three is expressed in the nature of our reality in the universe in many ways. We'll talk about that. Secondly, the four-position foundation is the root of the number 12, because as each of the four takes on 3 object partners, then 12 object partners are created. The four-position foundation is the fundamental foundation of goodness and the realization of God's purpose of creation. It's how each being fulfills its purpose and reflects God's nature and ultimately achieves goodness by achieving the four-position foundation. It's the fundamental foundation for the life of all beings, providing all the forces necessary for their existence. Therefore, we can say that the four-position foundation is God's eternal purpose of creation, because every being strives to achieve it. Now, in human life, what is this four-position foundation? God, man, woman, and child. It is the family. Not just any family, but a God-centered family. And so Jesus said in the 19th chapter of Matthew, haven't you read that from the beginning he who made them male and female, and said for this reason the two are to become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. And what God has joined together, let not man put asunder. From the beginning, we're created male and female to realize this relationship and bring about new life. How can two bodies become one flesh? Only by producing a child, a union that reflects both of the parents. This four-position foundation, which in human life is the family, is God's eternal purpose of creation.